From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Members of the Biden family received $10 million from overseas companies in recent years, according to a House Oversight Committee report, as the Supreme Court upholds a California law on mostly out-of-state pork producers. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, columnists Kim Strassel and Alicia Finley. Welcome and happy Friday to you both. Earlier this week, Republicans on the House Oversight Committee unveiled a 36-page memorandum based on investigation and records obtained from 4 banks. This is one of the key paragraphs in the memo, at least to my eye. Quote, bank records show the Biden family, their business associates, and their companies received over $10 million from foreign nationals companies. The committee has identified payments to Biden family members from foreign companies while Joe Biden served as vice president and after he left public office, unquote. Let's listen to a clip of Kentucky Republican Congressman James Comer, chairman of the Oversight Committee, unveiling this investigation.
The Biden family, their associates, and their companies received over $10 million from foreign nationals and their companies. Some of that money came from a Chinese company and went to Hunter Biden's company. Other transfers occurred with the help of Rob Walker, who then sent it on to different Biden family members. This is not how lawful businesses operate. Chinese nationals affiliated with the Bidens created limited liability companies in the United States and then in a short period of time transferred their interest to a Chinese company that sent money to the Bidens. This is not normal.
Here's a piece of the statement from Hunter Biden's lawyer. Today's so-called revelations are retread, repackaged misstatements of perfectly proper meetings and business by private citizens, unquote. And at the time, Hunter Biden was working as a lawyer and consultant. So, Kim, what is your take on what and how much this report shows?
So some of this we had already known about, meaning that there were sums of money that Hunter Biden was earning from foreign companies at the time that his father was vice president. Some of it quite large and some of it quite suspicious in that, for instance, he sat on the board of a Ukrainian energy company for a while, was being paid enormous sums of money, seemingly not to really do anything, and given he had no expertise in that area. All of this had been exposed a while back by Senators Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson. The importance of this report is that it's laying out how this money was transferred. And the sense that you get is that it was very deliberately being done in a way to obscure where the money came from and obscure the amounts. So what you have here is over the period of time just before when Joe Biden became vice president, although, by the way, at a time when he was gearing up to run his second time for president, and then during the time he served as vice president, Hunter and his family members and business associates of them set up nearly 20 companies, many of them with very obscure names, things like Hudson West 3, Hudson West 5, Owasu, JBBSR. And what you see happening over and over is that large sums of money are often transferred into Hunter associate accounts, and then smaller amounts of money are given in incremental fashion over a period of months to different accounts belonging to Hunter and various family members. To give you one example of this, there was a Chinese-related firm called State Energy, and $3 million was transferred to a business associate of Hunter, and then $1 million of that was given in 16 payments over 3 months to 5 separate Biden accounts, including not just Hunter Biden, but his girlfriend at the time, Hallie Biden, and also a Biden account that nobody knows who it belongs to. It just simply says Biden on it. So this was going on a lot, and it leaves the impression, I heard Comer there say, this is not how lawful businesses work. What I didn't see in the report is anything so far explaining why this would be unlawful, but it's also not what Hunter's attorney said either, that this is all proper. I mean, this is odd. If normal companies, you go out, you have a name people understand, you sign a contract for a specific service, the money is paid into your account. This is not how this was being done. And it does raise a lot of questions about whether or not Hunter Biden wasn't well aware that some of these business dealings would certainly reflect poorly on his dad, given his dad's diplomatic role as vice president. And so maybe there was an intent there to make it a little harder to see what was going on.
How does this tie into any behavior from the president, Joe Biden? I mean, one of the headlines that I saw on this oversight report was that there was no wrongdoing proved by Joe Biden here. And we should say also that there is a long history of people close to political power trying to take advantage of it and monetize it. And it's not always clear whether the principal is involved in that activity or sometimes even aware of it.
Oh, yes, we should be very clear. Look, what this report does not have in it is any evidence that Joe Biden profited from any of this or that Joe Biden even was aware of any of this. Of course, the president has said that he wasn't. I think that there's certainly evidence out there to suggest that he knew a lot more than what he is saying. We actually have an eyewitness on record, another former business partner of Hunter Biden's, Tony Bobolinsky, who went public with a number of documents and his claim, which he's made under oath, that there was, at a period of time after Joe Biden had left the vice presidency, a beginning of a business operation in which he was supposed to receive some funds. Everyone has said that that's not the case, and we'll see where that goes. But I do think Comer says that they're going to continue investigating. And I think given the very vehement denials by the president that his son has ever done anything wrong, given the very kind of unsavory ways some of this money has all been sloshing around, that they do need to do some more digging and see where all the money ended up in the end. There's still a lot of unknown questions here.
To underline the point about the investigation that is still ongoing, this is another line from the House Oversight Report. It says any services provided for these fees would likely have corresponding invoices. The companies may also maintain books and records detailing the use of such funds. The parties should have contracts, agreements, or other communications setting forth the terms of the engagement and expectations of the parties. The committee intends to obtain those materials to the extent they exist. So Comer seems to be signaling here that he intends to figure out what reported value Hunter Biden was offering to these companies in exchange for these fees that apparently total something like $10 million over the years that we're talking about. But Alicia, it is important to get on record here that President Biden has already defended this conduct. During a presidential debate in 2019, he said, "My son did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong." He said similar things last week in an interview with MSNBC. Again, he said, "My son has done nothing wrong. I trust him. I have faith in him, and it impacts my presidency by making me feel proud of him." And a couple of things there. One is that now that we have some of these specifics on record, I would hope that as we get into the 2024 presidential campaign, the president is forced to look a little bit more closely at this and provide a more specific response to some of these allegations. And number two is, now that he is the president, Alicia, what do you make of him going out and saying, "My son did nothing wrong"? We already know that there's the Justice Department investigation into Hunter Biden, and some of that has to do with tax stuff. Some of it has to do with whether he lied on a background check form to get a gun. But the president, remember, is the chief law enforcement officer of the United States.
Well, right. I think he's trying to, or intentionally or otherwise, discourage the Justice Department from investigating these matters, including those that you brought up. Now, on one hand, perhaps automatic reflex, somebody accuses your son of doing something wrong. A parent might turn a blind eye or say, automatically become a little defensive, but he needs to remember he's the president of the United States. He could have just said, "I'm not going to comment on these matters. The Justice Department is investigating, so it would be inappropriate for me to comment on these matters because they are under investigation." And that's what he should have said. Otherwise, what he's basically done is dissuade the prosecutors from even investigating these matters. It is illegal. Bribery is illegal under U.S. laws. One of the matters that may be under investigation with these new details that we're seeing were these bribes or kickbacks that he was being paid by Chinese officials to win favor with the administration, whether they're business deals or other regulatory matters, whether he was basically working on behalf of these Chinese officials or Communist Party officials to win favor with the government. And I think that Biden showed a kind of disregard of political norms, but also his own position, his own stature. President Trump often forgot when he made comments that he was the president of the United States, and then he needs to be careful when he speaks. And I think in this case, President Biden did the same.
One final note on this committee report. The committee also says that it is looking at legislation to strengthen financial disclosures, and it describes a gaping legislative hole because President Biden is not required to file financial disclosures for immediate family members other than a spouse or dependents. So Hunter Biden is not a dependent of President Biden any longer. And Kim, I wonder what you make of that idea. And just to broaden the conversation a little bit, I would imagine if you had a law that required presidents to disclose non-dependent children's financial information, more presidents other than this one might object to that, including President Trump.
Yeah, but I think it's a really interesting point because if you go back through history, as you noted in the beginning, this is obviously not the first time that people in the orbit of the president or the vice president, and often family members, have sought to capitalize financially on the fact that their relatives are central to power. And I mean, you can go back through that through history, the stories of Bill Clinton's brother, Tony Rodham. There was all kinds of stuff like this. Trump more recently, lots of questions of this. And so one thing I actually liked about this report, just as a side note, is that it laid out in the beginning all of the reasons for why it was doing this and the legislative purpose behind this investigation, something that I would simply note was not present in many Democratic investigations. For instance, most recently, the January 6th committee, or some of the investigations, or for instance, the initial impeachment investigation of Trump. It was never clear what Congress's business was looking at any of that. But this, they are saying, we've long had these disclosure laws, but clearly they are not capturing some issues that are really relevant. And just to put a kind of little point on this, you had quoted some of Biden's words. When one of those debates, Biden actually also said, my son never took any money from China. Okay, that's simply just not true. And why was he defensive on that? Because this is a very serious issue, meaning the particular character that Hunter was dealing with here is a guy named Yi Jianming, who was involved with a very influential Chinese company for a while called CEFC, very tied to Chinese military intelligence and tied to the central communist government, and some of whose principals, at least one, Patrick Ho, was actually convicted in the United States of using his company money to bribe African officials. And so the worry here is that Hunter Biden isn't providing any legitimate services, that he's taking money to make introductions. And he has actually even kind of bragged about that in the past. There were some emails that were released by Mr. Bobolinsky in which Hunter brags, the reason CEFC is coming is because they want to be my partner, to be partner with the Bidens. I'm the only one putting an entire family legacy on the line, he said. And that certainly sounds as though somebody who is potentially getting paid money for access. And that's a problem, not just in terms of the financial situation with Joe Biden, but in terms of security issues. And so I think that they are at least exploring something that does really matter. Whether or not the ultimate decision is that transparency laws should be expanded to cover a greater number of people in the family of a president or vice president is something we still need to debate, but it at least is a question that is an obvious issue that needs to be discussed.